They seemed like the perfect couple. A brilliant surgeon, a devoted wife, a quiet home in a beautiful town. But behind closed doors, truth rotted like wood beneath fresh paint. When Catherine crosses the line with a stranger, she doesn't just risk her marriage. She uncovers a network of secrets, lies, and a conspiracy that could cost her everything. If you're into emotional thrillers, forbidden affairs, and jaw-dropping twists, you're in for a ride. Grab your headphones, get comfortable, and dive into this full-length story. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of drama like this. The morning began like any other. Catherine Miller stirred cream into her coffee, standing barefoot in the kitchen of her classic colonial home in Brookline, Massachusetts. The countertops were spotless, the air smelled faintly of cinnamon from the candle burning on the island, and soft jazz played from the living room speaker. To the outside world, her life was perfect: charming husband, bright teenage daughter, white picket fence. But something was missing. Something had been missing for years. James, her husband of 17 years, was already gone, left before dawn for the hospital, where he was chief of neurosurgery. He hadn't kissed her goodbye. He hadn't for the past 6 months, maybe longer. Catherine sipped slowly. She watched the sun slide through the large bay window and cast slanted golden lines across the hardwood floor. She hated how quiet the house felt without conversation, without touch. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her assistant, Laurel. Derek Quinn will be at the Hawthorne property this morning to start the porch restoration. He's early, just a heads up. Catherine blinked. She had completely forgotten. The Hawthorne property, an 1860s Victorian fixer-upper, was the crown jewel of her listings this season. It had character, ornate molding, creaky floors, a narrow spiral staircase that felt like something out of a Bronte novel. If she sold it at asking price, she'd earn enough commission to not have to beg James for vacation money again. She quickly threw on jeans and a soft gray sweater, twisted her hair into a messy bun, and grabbed her keys. The house sat 5 minutes away on a shaded street lined with dogwoods and rusting iron gates. As she pulled up to the gravel drive, she saw the truck parked out front. Quinn Construction Restoration. A tall man was hauling wooden beams from the bed of the truck. He wore a black t-shirt that clung to his back, a pair of well-worn jeans, and heavy boots. His arms were inked dark lines of abstract patterns that disappeared beneath his sleeves. His hair was dark, a bit overgrown. He hadn't shaved in a few days. Catherine stepped out of her car and smoothed her sweater, suddenly aware of how casual she looked. "Derek?" she asked. The man turned. His eyes were gray, stormy, quiet, dangerous. He gave her a nod, pulling off one glove. "You must be the realtor," he said, his voice low and rough. "I was told to expect someone in heels." She raised an eyebrow. "Sorry to disappoint." He smirked. "I'm not." There was a silence, not uncomfortable, charged. Catherine cleared her throat. "I'm Catherine Miller. I just wanted to drop by, make sure you had access to the interior. It's not the sturdiest structure." He looked back at the old house with a sort of reverence. "She's not falling down, just needs someone to pay attention to her again." Catherine tilted her head. "Funny, that's what I said when I took this listing." They walked toward the front door together. He carried the beams like they weighed nothing. "I've worked on places like this before," Derek said. "They've got stories in the walls." "Ghost stories?" "Worse, real ones." Inside, the house was cold. Dust hung in the air. The floor creaked with every step. "This place gives most people the creeps," Catherine said, watching him run a hand along the staircase rail. "I like quiet places," he replied. "They don't lie to you." She didn't respond. She wasn't sure how. As they entered the living room, sunlight filtered through the tall windows and painted his face in long amber shadows. Catherine noticed the faint scar on his jaw, the way his mouth tilted slightly when he was lost in thought. "Your company's reputation precedes you," she said, trying to bring the conversation back to neutral. "Laurel said you specialize in restoring original features." "I specialize in what's real," he said, turning to face her, "even if it's damaged." Their eyes met for a long time. Catherine was the first to break the moment. "Well, I'll leave you to it," she said, stepping back. "If you need anything, I'm just a call away." As she turned toward the door, his voice stopped her. "Mrs. Miller," he said. She looked over her shoulder. "Do you believe in second chances?" There was a pause, a breath, a thought she didn't want to admit aloud. "I used to," she said quietly. Then she left. But that sentence, that voice, those eyes, they stayed with her all day. And all night. Catherine didn't tell James about the contractor. Not that it was a secret. Not yet. But when she sat across from him at the dinner table that evening, watching him scroll through his phone between bites of salmon and arugula, she didn't mention the house, or the man working inside it, or how he looked at her like he was trying to read the whole story behind her eyes. They hadn't had a real conversation in months. Not since the fight in January when she'd asked him point blank if he was seeing someone else. He hadn't denied it. He just looked at her like she was being dramatic and asked if they could not do this tonight. Since then there had been a quiet truce between them, polite, surface level, sterile. Their daughter Lily was upstairs studying, Sats were coming up. Catherine heard the muffled sound of indie pop music bleeding from under her door. So Catherine said casually, "How was the oar today?" James didn't look up. "Fine." She waited for more. "There wasn't any." "And how's your new assistant, Julia, right?" His fork stopped just for a second, then resumed. "She's efficient," he said without tone. Catherine took a sip of wine. "You're not very talkative lately." He set his phone down finally. "I'm exhausted, Kat. I've got 3 surgeries this week. Can we not turn this into something?" "Something like what?" He looked at her. His face was still handsome, clean-shaven, sharp-jawed, but the warmth she used to recognize in his expression had been replaced with something colder, distant. "I don't know," he said. "A confrontation, an accusation, a conversation that ends with one of us sleeping in the guest room." She said nothing. He sighed. "I'll be out early tomorrow." "I know." James picked up his phone again. The light from the screen glowed against his wedding band. That night, Catherine lay awake staring at the ceiling. She could hear the soft tick of the antique clock on her dresser. She could hear the wind stirring through the bare trees outside. But most of all, she could hear herself thinking. About Derek. His hands, his voice. The way he looked at her like she was the only one in the room. She hated how alive it made her feel. The next morning, Catherine returned to the Hawthorne house with coffee and a new set of keys. When she pulled up, Derek was already there, shirtless under the morning sun, sawing through a thick beam of pine on the front porch. She paused in the car longer than she should have, then stepped out. "Good morning," she said, handing him one of the coffees. "Didn't peg you for the generous type," he replied, taking it. "Didn't peg you for punctual." Derek smiled. "Touche." She watched him sip, then set the cup down and lean over his tools, his back flexed with every movement. "So what's the verdict?" she asked, trying to sound breezy. He didn't look up. "The porch is salvageable, the support beams are rotted, but the foundation's solid. Sounds like half the marriages I know." He stopped working, turned to her slowly. "And yours?" Catherine raised an eyebrow. "You don't ask lightly loaded questions." "I don't like small talk." She stepped up onto the porch. "Then what do you like, Derek?" Their eyes locked. "Honesty," he said. She held his gaze. "I used to like that too," she murmured, then turned and walked into the house. They worked in parallel that day, she in the kitchen making notes for her listing, he sanding wood outside the open window. From time to time, she'd glance at him. He never caught her. But she could feel the tension like static in the air. Later that evening, back at home, James wasn't there. Again. Lily was on the couch, headphones and legs curled under a blanket. Catherine poured herself a second glass of wine and stood at the kitchen sink. Then on impulse she picked up her phone. She scrolled to a new message, typed out a sentence. "Let me know if you need anything else at the house tomorrow, C." She stared at it. Then hit send. A minute later her phone buzzed. "I need more than tools, D." Her fingers hovered over the screen. But she didn't reply. Not yet. The third time Catherine saw Derek, she didn't mean to. Not exactly. It was Friday, and the air held that early spring chill that flirted with warmth but never fully committed. She had a full afternoon, open house appointments, calls with buyers, paperwork, but somewhere between lunch and the 3 p.m. showing she found herself parked once again in front of the Hawthorne property. She told herself it was business, she needed to check the progress, that was it. Derek's truck was there, the front door was open. She knocked lightly as she entered, but no one answered. "Derek," she called out. Silence. The house felt different this time, not haunted, not lonely, just waiting. She wandered through the foyer and into the hallway. The sound of wood clattering echoed faintly from the second floor. She followed it up the creaking staircase, her heels soft against the old wood. At the end of the hallway, the master bedroom door was ajar. She pushed it open. Derek stood by the window, shirt off, blood trailing lightly down his forearm from a fresh scrape. He turned at the sound of the door. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Catherine stepped inside slowly. The afternoon light caught the dust in the air, making everything shimmer faintly, like the whole room was suspended in a dream. "You're bleeding," she said softly. He looked down. "Nail caught me, nothing serious." She moved toward him, gently taking his arm. Her fingers brushed his skin as she examined the wound. His breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. "You should clean it," she murmured. "Then clean it," he replied, his voice lower, tighter. She looked up at him, unsure if it was a command, a challenge, or a plea. But whatever it was, it broke the dam inside her. She leaned in, kissed him. And he didn't hesitate. Their mouths met like a collision, hungry, reckless, overdue. His hands gripped her hips, pulling her against him, her fingers tangled in his hair. The years of numbness, of restraint, of pretending it all dissolved under the weight of that one moment. He backed her into the wall, her breath caught, her pulse thundered in her ears. They didn't make it to the bed. Afterward, they lay tangled on the old wooden floor, the cold forgotten, the world outside non-existent. Catherine stared at the ceiling, chest rising and falling. "I shouldn't have come," she whispered. Derek turned his head, eyes heavy-lidded. "But you did." She sat up, brushing hair from her face. "This can't happen again." He didn't respond, just looked at her. And in that look she saw it. He already knew it would. That night she showered for 45 minutes. James was home. He asked if she was okay, half interested while half watching CNBC in the living room. She told him she was tired, headache, a long day. It wasn't a lie. Just not the whole truth. She crawled into bed beside him, the sheets sterile, the space between them miles wide. James reached over, hand on her hip. A reflex. She didn't pull away. But she didn't move toward him either. He fell asleep with his hand still there, limp and unaware. Catherine stared at the ceiling and cried. The next morning she deleted the message thread with Derek. She told herself it was over, that she'd gotten it out of her system. But deep down she knew the truth. Something had started. And nothing, not guilt, not distance, not denial, was going to stop it now. The following week unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance between reality and fantasy. Catherine and Derek didn't talk about what happened that day at the Hawthorne house, not in words, but everything else, the glances, the closeness, the tension. It was impossible to ignore. They found each other again the next Tuesday. This time in the study, sunlight leaked through the blinds. Derek locked the door without asking. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't slow. And afterward, as she buttoned her blouse and he pulled on his shirt, Catherine said what she thought she meant. "We have to be careful." Derek nodded. "Always. No one can know. No one will." She looked him in the eyes. "This isn't anything, it's just what it is." His jaw tensed. "And what is it?" She hesitated, then said it out loud. "An escape." He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. Back at home, James was growing more attentive. Suspiciously so. He brought flowers one evening, her favorite kind, peonies. "You hate flowers," Catherine said. He shrugged. "People change." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're different lately," he added. "So are you." He tilted his head. "Do you think we're still good together, Kat?" She paused. The question wasn't a trap, but it wasn't harmless either. "I think we're trying," she said. He nodded slowly. "Trying isn't the same as being happy." "I know." He studied her. "Are you?" She didn't answer. 2 days later, Derek texted her. "Upstairs bathroom is done. Want to see it?" She waited a full hour before replying. "I'm with clients." He responded instantly. "I'll wait." That afternoon she slipped away. The second floor of the Hawthorne house smelled of paint and pine. Derek leaned against the wall, arms crossed. No words. Just heat. They didn't touch at first. They just stood there, 2 feet apart, hearts racing, waiting for one of them to break. Then he kissed her, rough, urgent. She didn't resist. Later, as she dressed, she finally laid down the rules. No calls, no messages after dark, nothing that can leave a trace. Derek's voice was unreadable. Got it. And this ends when the project does. Does it? She froze. He stepped closer. Be honest, if I stopped tomorrow, would you? She didn't respond. Didn't need to. They both knew the answer. Later that week, Catherine found herself watching James sleep. His mouth slightly open, one hand under the pillow, vulnerable, familiar. She remembered when that sight used to comfort her. Now it only reminded her of what they'd lost and how far she'd gone to feel something again. She touched his hand gently. He stirred, murmured something, then turned away. She stayed awake until the sun came up. Saturday evening, Lily asked a question over dinner. Are you and Dad okay? Catherine almost choked on her wine. James looked up from his plate. Of course we are, he said. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. Catherine forced herself to match it. Why do you ask? Lily shrugged. You're just different lately, both of you. Teenagers notice everything, even when they pretend not to care. Catherine reached across the table and took Lily's hand. We're okay, she whispered. But even Lily didn't seem convinced. Sunday, Derek sent another text. Want to meet? She stared at the screen for a long time, then replied. No, we need space. The dots flickered, then disappeared. For 3 days he said nothing. Then Thursday morning she found a single note taped to the inside door of the Hawthorne house. It read, I'm not the one you're running from. And with it, a Polaroid photo. Of her. Standing at the window on the second floor. Alone. The photograph haunted her. Catherine kept it tucked in her purse for 2 days before finally burning it in the kitchen sink late one night. After James had fallen asleep in front of the television, she watched the edges curl and blacken, the image warping and collapsing into ash, but the feeling it left behind didn't burn away. She hadn't even known it was taken. And that scared her more than she wanted to admit. The next time she saw Derek, she came prepared to end it. She wore a black turtleneck, jeans, no makeup, armor, not seduction. She parked in front of the Hawthorne house and waited a full minute before getting out of the car. Derek was in the foyer, kneeling beside a cracked floorboard, hammer in hand. He didn't look up when she entered. You've been quiet, he said. So have you, she replied. He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. Is that what you came to talk about? She walked past him into the living room. No, I came to ask what the hell that photo was. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. You said no messages, so I got creative. You took that without me knowing. I take a lot in without people knowing. She turned to face him fully. Is this a game to you? Derek didn't move. No, he said, but I think you want it to be. That way you can walk away and pretend it didn't mean anything. She felt her chest tighten. It didn't. Liar. His voice wasn't angry, it was quiet, almost sad. I know what it feels like to be drowning in a life that looks perfect on the outside. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you pretend your husband doesn't notice when you stop smiling. I know you listen for the sound of his car, hoping he won't come home. I know you stare at your reflection and wonder when you disappeared. She stood frozen. I've lived that too, Catherine. She hated that he said her name like it meant something. I'm not broken, she whispered. No, Derek said, but you are unfinished. She left without another word, and cried the entire way home. That night James surprised her by making dinner. Real dinner, not takeout, not cereal. Grilled chicken, asparagus, garlic, mashed potatoes. It was almost romantic. Almost? How was your day? He asked, pouring her wine. She studied him. His smile. His hands. The man she used to fall asleep beside with her legs tangled around his. Fine, she said. Did you go by Hawthorne? She blinked. Why? I saw your car there when I was driving back from the clinic. Catherine swallowed. Yeah, just checking progress. He nodded. That guy Derek, he's a bit rough, huh? She forced a smile. He's efficient. James didn't press, he just kept smiling. And something in that smile made her skin crawl. That night, while James slept, Catherine went into the office and opened his laptop. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she found it anyway. A folder titled Q Invoices Logs. Quinn Construction. Inside were spreadsheets, receipts, records of payment. And one note, dated 2 months before the project began. Confirm schedule for Derek Quinn, contractor with flexible background, used for stress test on client lead. She froze. Stress test? She scrolled further, saw references to psychological modeling, behavioral response, client observation. Derek had been assigned? She didn't understand. But the ground beneath her reality started to crack. The next day she didn't go to Hawthorne. She didn't answer Derek's text. She just sat in her car outside a therapist's office in Cambridge, hands shaking, trying to catch her breath. Later that evening, a new message came. From a blocked number. You don't know who to trust, but I can explain everything. Tomorrow noon, same place. Attached a new photo. Her sleeping. In her own bed. The next day, Catherine didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't think in any way that made sense. She just drove. Back to the Hawthorne house. Back to him. The sky was overcast, wind brushing through the trees like whispers. The old house loomed as always, beautiful, still, waiting. Catherine parked across the street, heart hammering, palms slick against the steering wheel. She wasn't sure if she was walking into a confession or a trap. But she had to know. She stepped onto the porch, the door creaked open before she knocked. Derek stood there. He looked like hell. His eyes were darker, sunken, jaw tense. I was wondering if you'd come, he said. I shouldn't have, she replied. He stepped back, let her in. They stood in the foyer facing each other, the silence stretched. I found the folder, she said. Derek didn't flinch. In James's files you were part of something, a stress test. What does that mean? He sighed, dragging a hand through his hair. It means your husband hired me. Catherine's stomach dropped. He what? Not to seduce you, Derek said quickly, to observe you, to get close, to push certain emotional boundaries. Catherine staggered back like she'd been slapped. You were what, a plant? I was a test, he said, to see if you'd break, if you'd cheat, if you were still loyal. She backed into the wall, nausea rising. All this time. No, listen to me, Derek stepped closer, desperate now. That was the job, but then you happened and it stopped being a job. Oh, save it, she spat. You manipulated me. I didn't fake what I felt. How would I know? Because I walked away, he said, voice cracking. Because I knew if I stayed I'd destroy you. You already did. She turned to leave. He grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. Catherine, there's more. She froze. There was another file on me. What? I thought I was watching you, but he was watching both of us. Her head spun. Why? Derek let go, stepped back. Because he needed proof that you were the problem, that if your marriage failed it was your fault. The words settled like poison in her blood. James wasn't just suspicious. He was building a case. That night, Catherine didn't go home. She checked into a motel off Route 9 under a fake name. She stared at the ceiling for hours, trying to piece together when her life had stopped being hers. The answer was simple. It never had been. The next morning she returned to the house once more. This time she brought the folder. And a recorder. James was in the study sipping coffee. Hey, he said, you're back early. I have questions. He glanced up. About? She dropped the folder on the table. His eyes flicked down. Then back up. I see. Say something, she whispered. I did what I had to do. You hired someone to seduce me? No, he said calmly. I hired someone to test you. Catherine's voice shook. You don't test your wife like she's a lab rat. James stood. You were pulling away, distracted, distant. I needed to know if it was me or if you were already gone. Tears stung her eyes. And now you do. He nodded slowly. Now I do. She pulled the recorder from her bag. Pressed play. His voice echoed back from the device. I hired someone to test you. James paled. You recorded that? I'm sending it to my lawyer. James's face contorted, shock first, then something uglier. You won't get away with this, he growled. I already have, she whispered. And she walked out. Outside, the sky was breaking, clouds splitting to reveal pale morning light. Catherine climbed into her car and drove. For once she didn't look back. Catherine didn't tell Lily. Not yet. How do you tell your 17-year-old daughter that her father set up an emotional ambush to prove her mother was unfaithful? That her family was nothing more than a performance? You don't. So she told Lily she was staying at a friend's for a few days to figure some things out. Lily accepted it with a skeptical squint and a tight hug. But Catherine knew the questions were coming. Soon. She moved into a short-term rental, a small loft on the third floor of an old brownstone near the center of town. It smelled like lemon cleaner and loneliness. The walls echoed when she walked. No photos, no memories, just clean, neutral air. It was the most peace she'd felt in months, maybe years. Meanwhile, Derek vanished. No texts, no calls. His truck gone from the Hawthorne house. Catherine drove by once, then again, before finally calling Laurel to confirm he'd officially pulled out of the project. Laurel said he's left without notice. No forwarding address, no invoice. Just gone. But the silence didn't last. 4 days later, Catherine received a manila envelope in her mailbox. No stamp. Just her name scrawled across the front. Inside, photos. Dozens. All of her. Some at the grocery store, some at the Hawthorne house, some at night through her bedroom window. Some from before she'd ever met Derek. There was no note. Just a flash drive. She played it on her laptop with shaking hands. It was video. Grainy, black and white surveillance footage. Her kitchen, her car, her daughter's bedroom. Catherine collapsed onto the floor. Not from fear. From rage. She drove straight to the hospital. James wasn't expecting her. He was in the hallway outside an operating room, speaking to a young resident, clipboard in hand. He looked up as she approached, paled. "We need to talk," she said, voice like ice. "I'm working." "Now, James." He followed her down the corridor to an empty conference room. She tossed the photos onto the table. And then the flash drive. He stared. "Didn't touch them." "You had cameras in our house," she said, "in Lily's room." "I was protecting us," he said, calm, detached. Catherine shook her head. "No, you were controlling us. I was watching over what I built. That's not the same." "Is that what you tell yourself?" He looked her dead in the eye. "You cheated." She didn't blink. "Because I stopped feeling human with you." He stepped forward. "You were supposed to be loyal." "I was for 17 years. James's voice cracked. "And now what? You're going to leave me and run off with that loser, the guy I hired?" Catherine stepped back. "No, I'm going to leave you because I finally see who you are." She turned to the door. Then paused. "And by the way, I sent copies of the flash drive to my attorney and to the press, in case anything ever happens to me." His face twisted. "You're bluffing." She smiled. "Try me." That night, Catherine returned to her apartment. A single envelope waited on the welcome mat. Inside, a photo. Not of her. Not of James. Of Derek. Standing outside a gas station. Face bruised. Holding a handwritten sign. "I didn't walk away, they took me." The photo of Derek didn't come with a return address. No sender. No message. Just those 7 haunting words in black ink, shakily written on a piece of cardboard. "I didn't walk away, they took me." Catherine stared at it long enough for the coffee in her hands to go cold. The bruises on his face were fresh, swollen around the cheekbone, a split lip, one eye barely open. It wasn't a selfie. Someone else had taken the photo. Someone who wanted her to know. But why? And what did they mean? She brought the image to the police the next day. They were polite. They were skeptical. They filed it under potential harassment and told her they'd call if anything turned up. They didn't. So she turned to the only person who might have answers. Her lawyer. Monica Evans had the soul of a pit bull in the body of a yoga instructor. When Catherine walked into her office holding the photo, Monica dropped her phone mid-conversation. "You're telling me the man your husband hired has now disappeared, and someone is sending you proof he's being held?" Catherine nodded. Monica leaned back in her chair. "Your husband's got money, contacts, a reputation to protect. If he thought Derek was a loose end." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. The walls of the apartment felt closer, the air thicker. She sat on the floor of the living room and scrolled through old texts from Derek, old photos. The first time he sent her a picture of the finished staircase at Hawthorne. The first time he said, "I don't want to ruin you, I want to wake you up." She didn't realize she was crying until her shirt collar was wet. Then the knock came. 3:27 am. Not loud. Just 3 sharp raps. She froze, heart pounding, tiptoed to the door. There was no one outside. Just another envelope. This time a key inside. And a single sentence scribbled on an index card. Check the basement of 211 Marlborough Street. Don't come alone. She didn't sleep. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't even think really. By 9 am she was parked 2 blocks away from the address. 211 Marlborough Street was a shuttered office building, old brick-faced, windows dark. She wasn't stupid. She brought someone. Monica came with her flashlight, pepper spray, and the courage of a woman with no tolerance for mystery. Together, they entered through the rear door using the key. The building smelled of mildew and rust. The basement was worse. They descended concrete stairs until they hit the bottom. And then the sound. A faint cough. A groan. A man chained to a chair in the far corner, face swollen, shirt blood-stained. Derek? Catherine dropped to her knees beside him. He blinked through the swelling. "You came," he whispered. "Who did this to you?" she cried, trying to undo the chains. But Monica was already calling for help. "I don't know," Derek murmured. "They wore masks, said it was about James, said if I talked." He shuddered, his voice broke. Catherine pressed her forehead against his. "You're safe now." But she knew better. No one was safe. Not anymore. 2 hours later, Derek was in a hospital bed under police guard. Catherine sat beside him, holding his hand. Monica stood by the window, arms crossed, phone to her ear. When she hung up, her face was pale. "They think someone from inside the hospital organized it," she said. "Someone close to your husband." Catherine closed her eyes. Of course. James had always said his network was everything. Now she was trapped inside it. And if he knew Derek was still alive? She stood up, grabbed her coat. "I need to finish this." The sun was just starting to rise when Catherine pulled into the driveway of the Hawthorne house. The same house where it all began. Where she had first kissed him. Where she had first crossed the line. Where the life she thought she'd built began to splinter and crack like old floorboards. She stepped out of the car slowly, her boots crunching against gravel. The morning was still, cold, the air felt heavy. Like it was holding its breath. Inside, the house was dark, dusty, abandoned again. Derek's tools still sat in the corner. The scent of pine lingered faintly in the air. Catherine ran her fingers along the banister of the staircase he had restored. The wood felt warm beneath her touch, like something alive. She climbed slowly, past the rooms where they had touched, whispered, breathed into each other like they were trying to forget everything else. When she reached the top floor, she found what she came for. The secret. James had bought the Hawthorne house. Not through his name, but a shell company, Everson Holdings Ilex. The deed was buried in the property tax records Monica had uncovered the night before. And beneath the floorboards of the attic, hidden under a loose plank, she found the rest. A folder, photos, notes, receipts, dates, times, surveillance logs. James had been watching her long before she met Derek. Long before he tested her. The game had started earlier. He'd planted the seeds. And waited. She was holding the folder in her hands when the voice came from behind. "I didn't think you'd come alone, James." Catherine turned slowly. He stood in the doorway, wearing a gray coat, gloves, calm expression. But his eyes were on fire. "I figured you'd be at the hospital," she said quietly. "Oh, I was," he replied, "long enough to know he'll recover." He took a step closer. "But you won't walk away from this, Catherine. You had him kidnapped. I had him removed. You had him tortured." James's mouth twisted into something cruel. "I gave him a choice. He made the wrong one." She held up the folder. "It's over. I have everything, every file, every receipt." James nodded slowly. "Then you know what I know. That you're a monster? That you were never mine." She flinched. I was your wife. You were a facade, a role, a script. I wanted to know if you were real. I was, she whispered, until you made me doubt myself. He lunged. She fell back. The folder slipped from her hands. They struggled, shouted, her shoulder slammed into the wall, his hand went to her throat. She kicked, bit, punched. The fight rolled down the stairs. Hardwood oak blood. And then? A crack. A sickening final snap. James lay twisted at the bottom of the stairs. Neck at an angle no man could survive. Blood pooling beneath his head. Catherine stood at the top step, trembling. Chest heaving. Lip bleeding. 10 minutes later she called the police. 10 hours later she signed the statement. Self-defense. And this time it was the truth. 3 days later the papers called it a tragic accident in a troubled marriage. The hospital mourned their star surgeon. The community gossiped about the beautiful widow. Catherine said nothing. To anyone. Derek was discharged. They didn't reunite in a blaze of passion. They met at a bench in a quiet park at dusk. He sat beside her, slow, careful, stitched and healing. You're free now, he said. I'm alone now. That's not the same thing. She turned to him. Do you still love me? She asked. I never stopped. And she didn't cry. She just laid her head on his shoulder. And breathed. For the first time in a long time. The funeral was small. James's parents flew in from Connecticut. A few colleagues from the hospital came in their navy suits and stiff collars. No one said much, no one cried. Catherine stood beside the casket in black, clutching Lily's hand. She didn't speak during the service, didn't eulogize. What would she say? He was brilliant. He was broken. He broke me. Instead, she listened, she watched, she nodded. And when it was over, she drove home alone. Not to the colonial house, of course, that had already been sold. She went back to the apartment. To silence. To consequence. That night, Lily confronted her. The girl had been quiet for weeks, retreating behind herbs and half-hearted meals, but Catherine knew her daughter was watching, waiting. What happened? Lily asked quietly from the kitchen table. Catherine sat down across from her, didn't pretend to misunderstand. Your father tried to hurt someone, she said softly, and me. Lily's mouth tightened. But he's dead. Catherine nodded. He fell. Lily looked down at her hands. Was it because of you and Derek? Catherine didn't answer right away. But she owed her daughter the truth. Yes, she said finally, partly. A long silence. Then Lily stood. I just want to be somewhere that doesn't feel like a lie, she whispered. And went to her room. Catherine broke down in the hallway. Collapsed to the floor. Alone. The next morning she called Monica. I need to disappear, she said. Her lawyer didn't ask why. Just gave her names. A week later, Catherine legally changed her last name. Not to her maiden name. To something new. A clean slate. She rented a car. Closed all her accounts. Set up a trust for Lily under Monica's firm. Left a letter for her daughter explaining everything, apologies, memories, the money, and the address of a therapist she trusted. She cried writing it. Then left it on Lily's pillow. And drove. Derek met her in Vermont. They stayed in a tiny cottage near a lake, surrounded by trees and quiet. He didn't ask questions. He just made coffee in the mornings, fixed the porch railing, kissed her like she still had pieces left to put together. And she did. Slowly. Painfully. Day by day. One afternoon, Catherine stood barefoot by the water's edge. She looked down at her reflection. And whispered, I forgive you. She wasn't sure who she meant. James. Herself. Or both. It began with a letter. No return address, no name. Just a single sheet of paper in a plain white envelope delivered to their cottage mailbox in Vermont. Derek found it first. He didn't open it. He handed it to Catherine, expression grim. She unfolded it slowly, hands shaking before she even read the words. You think it's over. You think you've run far enough. But fires leave smoke. And someone always follows the smoke. There was no signature, but she didn't need one. James might be dead, but the world he built had many hands. That night, Derek sat with her in the tiny kitchen, a fire crackling in the old stove. "We should go," he said softly. Catherine shook her head. "Run again?" He didn't argue. They both knew running was no longer enough. The next morning, she met Monica halfway back to Boston in a small cafe in Brattleboro. Her lawyer had aged 5 years in one. "You're still being followed," Monica said, sliding a folder across the table. Photos. Catherine at the market. Derek chopping wood. Lily walking out of her new school. "They're not trying to find you," Monica said. "They're watching who you care about." "Why?" Catherine asked. Monica leaned forward, her voice dropped. "Because James wasn't just a surgeon, he was part of something bigger. Private networks, whistleblower suppression, experimental testing, quiet, powerful people backed him. You embarrassed them." Catherine felt her throat tighten. "So what do I do?" "You don't fight back, not directly." "Then how?" Monica smiled grimly. "You burn what they want most." That night the fire began. Not literal flames. Digital ones. Monica leaked James's records to 3 journalists, 2 senators, and a federal oversight committee. The documents revealed falsified surgeries, tampered trial results, dozens of patient files altered under his login. The story exploded. Headlines screamed across the internet. Neurosurgeon exposed in widespread medical cover-up. Private networks used patients like lab rats. Posthumous scandal rocks Massachusetts hospital. They couldn't erase it now. And Catherine? She was gone. Nothing to trace. No forwarding address. No interviews. Just smoke. But that wasn't the end. 1 month later, Derek woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of the front door opening. He grabbed the bat by the bed, heart racing. But it wasn't an intruder. It was Catherine, standing in the doorway, wet from the rain, holding a file. "What is it?" he asked, crossing to her. She didn't speak. She handed it to him. Inside, a death certificate. Lily Miller. Age 17. Overdose. But it was fake. At the bottom was a note. "This is what they were planning. I had to know how far they'd go. They're not done, Derek. Not yet." The fake death certificate lay on the table between them like a ticking bomb. Catherine stared at it, her fingers trembling. Derek sat across from her, silent, unmoving. "They were preparing to erase her," she whispered. "If I didn't stay quiet, they were going to kill my daughter." The firelight flickered across her face. Derek's jaw clenched. "You think this was just about James, but it was never just him, was it?" Catherine shook her head. "He was a puppet, or maybe a willing pawn. I don't know, but the strings go deeper." That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed beside Derek, eyes wide open, the ceiling fan spinning above them like a slow countdown. She had survived betrayal, surveillance, manipulation, violence. But this was different. Now it wasn't just about her. It was about Lily. About making sure the cycle stopped. And it wouldn't end with running. It would end with a door. One last door. And finally choosing to open it. 3 weeks later, Catherine walked into a federal courtroom under an alias and sat down in a private meeting with 2 U.S. attorneys. She handed over everything. The notes. The footage. The names. She told them about Everson Holdings, about the patient testing, about how her husband had manipulated her life under the guise of love. When they asked about Derek, she said nothing. When they asked about Lily, she said she's safe and she stays that way. The case took a year. Arrests were made. A class action suit followed. The hospital's name was changed, heads rolled, reputations collapsed. But Catherine? She didn't stay to watch. She disappeared again, this time by choice, not fear. One final scene. A woman in her early 40s. New name. New air. New passport. Sitting outside a bookstore in coastal Maine, reading a paperback while the sea wind lifts her scarf. A man approaches. Taller, rough hands, familiar eyes. "Room for one more?" he asks. She doesn't look up right away. Then she does. And she smiles. Softly. Genuinely. Like someone who has earned peace the hard way. Behind closed doors, they built a new life. No lies. No tests. Just truth. And this time, they left the door open. Sometimes betrayal feels like the end of everything. But for Catherine, it was just the beginning. Behind every closed door, there's a truth waiting to be told. And sometimes the only way out is through the fire. What did you think of her story? Did she go too far, or was she finally free? Subscribe now to our channel for more gripping stories, one twist at a time. Leave a like, drop a comment, and share this video if it left you breathless. We'll see you behind the next door.